Can I connect to Snowflake, build a free-form dossier of UK pubs, incorporate Mapbox integration and build a hypercard all in 20 minutes? Stay tuned. Hi there, my name's Matt Pepper and I'm a Principal Sales Engineer based in the UK. I'm filming this in the evening because I have 3 children that don't understand what a locked door means when I'm working. This is the second in our series of Journey to the Cloud. This tutorial is aimed at people that may have used MicroStrategy before but may have not used some of the new features. All the data that I'll be using today is freely available on the internet, but I have loaded it into our Snowflake instance to demonstrate how easy it is to connect to Snowflake and pull the data into MicroStrategy. I will include some top tips about getting the best performance from your intelligent cube, formatting guidelines for Free-Form, as well as a fantastic link to show how responsive design works in MicroStrategy, as well as how easy it is to build a hypercard based on the same dataset that we generate. At the end of this tutorial, you will be able to build the dossier that you're seeing right now. So without further ado, let's get building. This is the information we'll be importing with pubs and latitude and longitude. The only thing that I've added is the country GB. The reason for this is so it maps perfectly for Mapbox integration at the top layer, GB. We'll see that in the dossier shortly. Every country has slightly different levels supported by Mapbox. In the UK, we will be looking at postcode area and postcode district. Okay, so let's add some external data. You can specifically search for a Snowflake data connector. There are 3 options: building, typing or selecting tables. So we'll start with the selecting. As you can see, this one is using a DSN, therefore that's in the ODBC INI and already set up. However, you can also create a DSN-less one as long as you have all of the login credentials. I'm going to bring in the pubs data and then start preparing it. The first thing I'm going to do is create a multi-form attribute which links the ID, the pub name and latitude and longitude all together. As I don't actually want to see the ID in the data, I'm just going to untick this box. Okay, I'm now just going to remove some of the things I don't need, so the eastings and northings. And now I'm going to define some relationships. Whilst MicroStrategy is pretty good at doing this, I find it's always better to add the relationships so there are many pubs to one postcode. I'm now going to add in another data source, which is my postcodes data. This time I'm going to actually add a query. Select the data source, which will be the Snowflake, and I'm just going to copy paste the SQL query that I've got here, which is connected to my postcodes data set. I'm making sure that I'm only bringing in the relevant postcodes, which is about 50,000 instead of about 1.5 million. That hopefully will improve the performance dramatically. You can see at the bottom that the query has executed correctly, and if you want to then edit the SQL before pushing it into MicroStrategy further, this is a really good place to double check. Okay, back in the preview window, I have now got 2 tables that are joined by postcode because they're the same data type and the same name. I'm now going to just make sure that postcode itself has got latitude and longitude as multi-form attribute, just because this may be useful in the future. I'm now going to make postcode area and postcode district have a geo tag. That means when I drag it into Mapbox itself, it will start looking for the attribute form on the polygons. The next thing I want to do now is to define the relationships. So postcode area goes into district and district goes into postcode. Once again, whilst MicroStrategy can do this, sometimes it does get a bit confused, so it's always a good thing to put these in specifically. I'm going to bring the data in to MicroStrategy itself as data import because that improves the performance in the dossier and doesn't have to go back to Snowflake every time we press something. Whilst we're waiting for this to load, a pro tip here, a schema cube, all data in the schema, is always going to be the most performant. The next performant is an MTDI, a multi-table data import. That means all the tables are in the same intelligent cube, which is what I've just done. The least performant is when you have two data sets and you join them on the fly, actually within the dossier. Okay, let's build the dossier. Now, my personal preference is always to see the tables separately, not in one big hit. That's my personal preference. Obviously, it's up to yourselves. I'm going to rename the row count to #pubs, just so it's a bit easier to see on graphs. And now I'm going to bring in an image that I found on the internet just to give it a dark mode theme, as that seems to be all the rage at the moment. This is how you change from a standard dossier into a free-form capability. As soon as you click that, you have the ability then to put images and visualizations on top of each other. The lines are snapping to parts of the grid. If you want to be a bit more exact than I am, there are the position and sizes of X and Y's with percentages in the grid on the left. I've now selected the geospatial Mapbox capability and I created my first layer, which I've called area. Because area doesn't have latitude and longitude itself, is actually a polygon, you have to go into the settings and then select area as well as the postcode underneath. You may notice this is not the UK. The reason for adding country GB is to put it as a secondary geotag. This then forces Mapbox to go to the right area. I'm adding some colour schemes now, so I'm going for the wild berry look because I think that looks really good with a black background, which I'll just add in now. So that's the first layer. The second layer is going to be postcode district. A top tip is, if you're going to create layers, is always to put the highest level of aggregation, in this example postcode area, at the bottom. You'll see why when we start zooming. So I'm just selecting the same colour scheme and I'm going to go through the same selection of marker and from marker to area. You do not need a secondary geotag for postcode district because it's detailed enough that Mapbox understands where it's from. I'm bringing the map labels to the front because it's easier to see the different towns. Underneath here you can see the zoom through layers. You can slide these around to fit your zoom preferences. As I created a multi-form attribute for pubs with latitude and longitude, the pubs themselves render immediately. You can fix when they are available once again in the map options and change the zoom level to what you feel is appropriate. I always tend to check this by zooming in and out to a different level to see how big a polygon renders and then stretch it appropriately. So that was Mapbox. Very, very easy and very, very effective. Let's start building the rest of the dossier. So I'm going to now create a graph with a number of pubs and average income. Postcode area seems to be a really good level to filter, and then this will then zoom into the different layers. Just sorting here now on the number of pubs. A top tip here is to actually take off the container fitting for all of the attribute forms. You can still scroll through all of them, but it makes it much, much more readable. I've seen with average income, but actually it's just summed them all up. So I'm just creating a derived metric, which whilst is not completely accurate, will give us a good indicator. And then changing the format of it so it's actually in pounds with a comma. And let's just replace that. That looks a lot better. Now the important bit, which is to make sure that the container is transparent so we can see the backdrop, and also to change the font to white so it's legible. I think now I'll create a postcode district so we can actually then see when we filter on a postcode area, we'll see the map, but we'll also see the number of pubs by postcode district selected. I'm just going to make sure that's sorted. And once again, I'm just going to change those formatting. Did you see the deliberate mistake? Yes, I actually made it no fill when it should have been white. Finally, I'm going to add a KPI metric so we can see the number of pubs that we've selected. Just going to do a few formatting changes, so therefore we want to make sure that the backdrop is no fill, the font is white, and then go into the actual title itself and make sure that that container is no fill as well. Okay, I think from a build perspective we're okay. What I'm now going to do is just make sure that when I select that bar chart, it targets everything else on the screen. So you can quite simply do that by clicking them and getting all those targets, pressing on apply. And when we then select the B, which is Birmingham, it should zoom straight in here. And you can see all the pubs as well. So from a zoom perspective, that's worked quite well, as has that one in Sheffield. Okay, so now I'm just going to add in some filters. So I'm going to put the different countries as well as the different regions, which I believe in this data set is only really to do with England. Another top tip is to actually ensure that your dossier looks good in a responsive manner. If people are going to be using it on a phone, you can click the responsive preview button here. And as you can see, because I've done nothing to it and I have a black background, it's not sure what to do, so just stacks things on top of each other. If you're going to use a background as I have, one way of doing it is to group these things together. But before I do, what I'm going to do is actually rename all of the objects, much like I did when I created report services documents. It's good practice to get into and makes editing in future much, much better. Once I've renamed everything, I am then grouping all of the objects together. You can do part of them or some of them, but in this example I want to group all together. And when I click on preview, then you can see that it all retains the same relationships with all the objects. On our community site, we have got best practices for creating a responsive free-form dossier. It's highly recommended for anyone that builds these, whether you are going to be building for a phone or a tablet, just because it makes you understand how visualizations will stack if moved to a different form factor. This follows how a website is built, so therefore people who are web developers will understand it quite easily. Okay then, let's see what our dossier looks like within library. From the chart we can see that Birmingham, the B postcode area, has got the most pubs, and when I click on the bar it zooms straight in and we can see each individual pub. I could also filter on a region, so let's say the southwest, and zoom all the way into those little islands down there and have a look at a particular pub that's been recommended to me. I've turned on my HyperCard, which has got this information in, and then I've done a search in Google for the pub. The next stage of this demo will show how to build that card. I'm now logged into Workstation and I can do a search for the datasets. And by simply right-clicking, I can then generate a card. On the left-hand side, we can see all the attributes and metrics from the cube that we've just built. And I'm selecting pubs as the title and then removing the IDs, latitude and longitudes because I don't need them anymore. I can then change the formatting and drag and drop any types of things that I need to have. So for example, titles or some list box, and then change the formatting of each of those individual sections. It is deliberate that the amount of visualizations are very small at the moment because the most important part of HyperIntelligence is the speed. If we don't keep the speed up, no one will use it and therefore it becomes useless. So we have got very limited widgets and we'll keep it that way for the moment. However, there's some amazing developments happening in HyperIntelligence in the next few months, so stay tuned for announcements in our future updates. And finally, at the end, I've added in a matrix box, which means I can then drag in some metrics. Now for this, I think I'm going to put in the population, let's say the number of households in that postcode. And if I wanted to add another one, let's say the average income, all I need to do is change the number of boxes that are available on the screen and drag and drop. You can also change the formatting. So this is obviously what is in the cube, but if you want to change the formatting as I did in the dossier to pounds and have a comma, then you can simply select those. And that's it. So I've clicked on save. I need to save my card somewhere, and I think I'm going to call this demo on the end so you can see I've created it on the fly, and click on save. So that has been saved. Now I'm going to go back to the plugin on Chrome where I will now refresh and then I'll log back in. And if I scroll right down to the end, you can see there is a card that's available. I'm going to click on that and that syncs with the server. That syncs the index itself, not the data. So basically the nouns of the pub's names. And if I then hover over the club, you'll be able to see, and there's a carousel option to demonstrate multiple cards. So there we go. I've managed to connect to Snowflake, build a free-form dossier incorporating Mapbox integration, find that Birmingham has got the largest amount of pubs per postcode area, and built a hypercard off the same dataset, all within 20 minutes, with a little bit of editing. Thank you ever so much for your time. I hope you've learnt a few things that will help you on your MicroStrategy journey. If you like this format, please let us know in the comments. We're posting more content on our MicroStrategy website every day, so please keep coming back and seeing if there's something of interest to you. Thank you and goodbye.